Hello. So I didn't realize, because I didn't do proper research, that since I only have 800 subscribers, I cannot use my phone, I suppose, to live stream. So I'm trying to use my computer. And here's my sketch, but I think I should try to rise my computer maybe a little bit. So please be patient with me. I hope this is working. So we're going to use some boxes maybe to lift this up. You can see my dirty home, which is not what I anticipated. This looks upside down for some reason. Does this look upside down? I feel like this looks upside down. Oh, shit. Okay. All right, I think this is the best we're gonna do, but I feel like it's not so good. Let's see if we can maybe raise it a little more. That makes a difference. I think that helps a little bit. Okay, let's see. All right. So I'm painting some mushrooms and a little frog and a butterfly and a snail. That's the plan today. But I also want to talk about, I was not anticipating my pajamas and tape being seen. So basically, I have added some artwork to my shop. So this is my shop, art pieces. Let me see. Can I add? I don't even know how to add things. Shit. So I add to my chat. Hello. So if you're interested in my art, you're interested, my site is here. And please say hi. And yeah, so these are some pieces that I've recently added just to my website. These are some girls that are in little kimonos. Here's a woman in a kimono. So these are done with gouache paint. And some are done with ink. So this is done with ink. So right now I have a flat shipping rate of $5 because I live in Japan. So the international is a little bit higher, but I am considering trying to lower that price. But I'm not quite sure. When I lived in Korea, it was a lot more expensive. So I'm a little not familiar yet with how expensive things are in Japan. I also want you to know that, like, in the camera, things look very nice, but this is a real painting made by a real human, so there are sometimes little errors. I would consider errors, like this. So I will try to remove these, or maybe I'll take them off the shop, but I didn't notice it till just now. But some don't. This one is pretty pristine in her glory, I think. So these are on my website right now if you're interested. But let's get to painting this mushroom and this frogs. And here's another girl. So, oh, I see Sungjin is in the chat. This is very stressful for me. And I have sort of decided to do something a little bit harder for myself because I am going to be making a really large painting for school, and I felt like I need some practice. So instead of just doing like floating pieces, which is what I would normally do, I'm going to try to cover the whole area. Huh, Zook? Zook might come into the feed. So the small air things. It looks kind of better with the small air things, looks more human. If you can explain a little bit exactly what you mean by that, I would definitely take it into consideration. So I'm going to start, I think, just blocking out the sky and the ground, and then I'm going to go to the mushrooms and the critters. So we'll go with a pretty typical sky color. We won't go with anything too crazy, I think. So we got white. It looks like, I think I have ultramarine somewhere, but this is primary cyan. I'm using Holbein gouache paints. And I'm going to mix kind of like a greenish, grayish sky color, I think, today. So let's see how that works out. So I have these little palettes that were required by my school. So I'm going to school in Japan, and I never had this happen before, but they basically like gave me all of the supplies. I just had to like send them a huge amount of money. That was a little terrifying. But they basically bought all the supplies and then I reimbursed them. So everybody has the same exact set of supplies. Whereas in the US, it's always been like the first day of class, we get like a syllabus of a sort. And then we buy the, materials ourselves. And I kind of prefer that method in some regard because you could potentially find used things or things that are cheaper or that kind of thing. But for Japan, since I was coming here for the first time, it was sort of nice to have everything taken care of. But I do have a lot of watercolors that I've never touched that were required, but I really just use this paint. Right now I'm using Holbein, but actually, again, the school bought us or got like Turner gouache acrylic paint, which I also like, but when I paint on my own, I try to use up my Holbein gouache when I make my own work because I still have a lot of Holbein gouache. And then for schoolwork, I tend to use the acrylic gouache. So we're just gonna go pretty fast and loose here. My new plan is to use oh, the small imperfections on your paintings are the air bubbles. Oh, well, that's nice if people feel like that makes it more human. I think even though I am a human and there's AI and all of these things, I really strive to make everything perfect. And I get really frustrated when I discover cat fur or there's this little like piece of dried paint that is showing up here. And I really don't like them intruding on my space. But I suppose I should try to embrace certain amount of imperfections because that is what sets me apart from AI, and that it is made by hand and it's not made by a program on the computer, even though they can do a very good job of making very human looking brushstrokes these days. I am going to continue hoping that there is going to be a place for me in the market, but I don't really want to go into AI because not only is it a little terrifying, it's also something that I've become a little bit dependent on, not for my art, but I do use ChatGPT all the time. And for better or ill, I feel like it's given me some incorrect information. Like I thought I could easily use my phone for this stream, but I've just discovered that I could only do that if I have enough subscribers, which I do not. That's why I'm using my beautiful laptop. So I hope you can see this well enough. I'm very nervous, so I'm sure I'm repeating myself. I did make a little post-it note of things that I want to talk about during this, but I also figure that I might run out of things to say, or I didn't really expect to have anybody in the chat, which is very kind. So thank you, Tran and Sangjin, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And it feels less alone than just having my little kitty here. But my point is I did queue up some an audiobook of a domain in the public domain Japanese audiobook if I need a break from talking. So that way I can listen to some Japanese and maybe my audience can listen to some Japanese as well. If you've ever heard of it, it's a book. It's like, oh, Warera wa neko de aru, something like that. Like I am a cat, and I've read some of it, I think in English, and it's just like this man's cat's diary. It's pretty funny. But I digress. So basically, I've just sort of blocked in the sky very loosely, including covering like the mushrooms because I'm going to paint over it. I feel like it took me a long time to sort of realize like the layering you can really do, especially with acrylic gouache as opposed to regular gouache. So what's nice about acrylic gouache that I've really leaned into is that you can, let it dry and then layer. Whereas when you use regular gouache, each layer of the gouache will become reactivated. Basically, if I did this in gouache and then I tried to paint on top of it, the two colors would start mixing together because the bottom layer would start getting wet again. And so that's what makes acrylic gouache so much fun, I think. But then as opposed to just acrylics, I feel like the pigment is brighter and more opaque than acrylics, which I prefer. But what's nice about acrylic, which I feel like I had an unfair bias about acrylic paint, that they're not like proper artist paints, is that like oil paint is the only paint that's like for artists, and then like I felt like gouache paint was the paint for like surface designers because I saw so many surface designers using gouache. So that's sort of why I started using it. It's never really something I used much before. So that's been interesting. But I went for a very bright, kind of greenish sky we've got going on here. I feel like if this was a real forest scene, there would be more trees and stuff, but I kind of am experimenting here with this stream and with this painting. So I have a painting, maybe I'll show at the end, that I've started just the sketch of. It's really big and I'm really nervous about being able to finish it on time. It's basically going to be a scenery. That's the main gist of it, is it's a scenery, a green scenery. And so I am not very confident in my ability to kind of do things loosely and to kind of like so the association said give us the cheap acrylics in art classes growing up too. Oh yeah, that's true. They do give us really cheap acrylics because that's what I mean, I feel like they're gonna give you whatever those little palettes and stuff. So yeah, we do have a negative association. But even the cheap acrylics, like they can still ruin your clothes. They should give us something else. But whatever, acrylics, I made some acrylic painting for one of my classes that we had to make. And I was kind of surprised with how good the quality came out. I felt like I'd maybe given acrylics not their fair share. But I am using, like I said, I'm really just focusing on acrylic gouache these days because it's really hard for me to find a style. I feel like that's something you hear about all the time. And I've decided that I don't really know how to find a style, but I can at least maybe stick to a limited amount of like materials instead of experimenting all the time with materials, which I am kind of prone to do. I can allow myself to just use one material or two or three materials, but I can allow myself to explore with subject matters. And that's sort of been my strategy for the past year and a half, I suppose. It's on my channel, but it was the first video I made this year. And it's about how I didn't find my art style. And I basically made 100 paintings that are small. They're like, so basically almost all of these paintings that I showed at the beginning of the stream, I made during this 100-day challenge that I set for myself. And I basically limited my materials to acrylic gouache, ink, and digital, which was my iPad Procreate. And that I couldn't use colored pencils. I couldn't use like micro pens and stuff like that, even though I do enjoy those. I felt like I'll just never ever develop a style if I just keep doing new things all the time. And now I feel like that's not totally true, but it is kind of nice to explore themes with and get familiar with a certain media. So I do feel like getting a lot more comfortable with acrylic gouache than I've ever been with any other paint, maybe. I used to do oil painting in high school, but that was many, many moons ago. And I don't know if I could do oil painting anymore. I don't think I would have the patience for it that is required. I hardly have the patience for doing painting as large as this one. You can see this painting is like, I don't know, a little more than twice the size of one of these. And I was actually going to do this size painting for this stream, but I bought some, I didn't bring it, but I bought some paper and I felt like the texture was too strong. It was like too heavy, too rough, too coarse, and I don't know if I like that paper because it just seemed to have too much texture for my liking. So this paper doesn't, and I'm getting hairs in this, and I don't know why. So this is more of a traditional, by the way, calligraphy brush. Again, it came with school. It's in Japanese. It says Van Gogh though, so it says some sort of Van Gogh type of brush. So I don't know. Maybe not a traditional brush if it says Van Gogh on it, but whatever. Point being is that the hairs are coming out of it as I'm painting. And I thought maybe it's because it was a traditional calligraphy brush and it can't really handle all of my rough mixing techniques. As you can see, I kind of just mix in circles. I'm pretty slapdash about the whole situation. Whereas other people are probably a little bit kinder to their brushes. I tend to be a little rough on them. So like I said, I did sort of want to talk about a particular thing. I was going to sort of talk about feeling like a failure in my art. I was going to make a video just about this, but honestly, the concept depressed me too much. So I thought maybe in a live stream where it's just more literal stream of consciousness, I could talk about feeling like a failure, and not just like a failure in my art, but like a failure in all aspects of my life these days. So I'm have on my channel, my like homepage or whatever, I do have my main video is like starting over at 30 in my 30s. So I'm 34 and I feel like I don't have any career or anything to really show for myself and what I've done with my life since I've become a legal adult at 18. I feel like I've really, my 20s were a bit of a wash, except that I finally pulled out a degree out of my butt at like 28. And then I moved overseas. I knew I always wanted to move to another country. And honestly, I was kind of just not doing anything after graduating. I was working for, if you're I'm not sure if this app still exists, but it was around 6 years ago, was the app WAG, which is a dog walking app. And I also signed up for Rover. And so like after graduating from this really expensive art school that I went to in Pasadena, California, I was walking dogs and hanging out at home. And I had just gotten a new cat who lives with me here now in Japan. And I really didn't do anything else except waiting for, dog walking from, WAG. I did some sketching at home. I was finally like developing an art process of my own at that time, but I wasn't looking for a job hard enough. I wasn't motivated and I was depressed, I think. And I finally like got a pretty interesting job offer working at a company that did printing for products. And they were really nice. The job interview went really well. And um, I was like, I could work this job. This could happen. Or I could really try to go overseas. And I decided that there was no more dilly-dallying, and I wasn't going to keep procrastinating on this sort of dream that I had. So I finally got my act together. I signed up to a recruitment site for international schools called Search Associates, which is what my cousin had used when she worked at an international school. And I turned down the job, even though I didn't have another offer at that time. And at least that's how I remember it. I could be wrong, but um, and I decided to go to Korea. So I got a job offer at an international school on Jeju Island, which is the Hawaii of Korea. It's in a lot of K dramas if you're a fan, and it's not the Hawaii of Korea. Don't let them fool you. And I think that was probably still, even though I feel like a failure now, I still think it was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. I just feel like I was really lonely and depressed in the US, and I didn't really have a core group of friends. I felt like the one good friend that I made in school moved to where her fiance was living. I had another friend had moved to Singapore after Trump won, and I just didn't really have, I feel like, a lot going for me. And I was, I had a medical, card, if you know what I mean. And I think that's just really what I did all day and walk dogs. And it was time to get out of that cycle. And, but in those 6 years, and I mean, I appreciate that. That's really kind that like I've made a life, but the thing is I don't feel like I've made a life. Like I feel like I'm really struggling financially these days. So I did live in Korea for 6 years, ultimately, around 6 years. And because of that, I was like, on the books. And that meant that my pension was being taken out of my paycheck every month, and which is great. And my friend would always say, like, that is not your play money. That, like, when you leave Korea, you put that into your retirement because that is pension. That is your, like, retirement. And at the beginning, I'd always be like, nah, that's play money. That's my like savings. Like I don't agree with you. But by the time I finally left Korea, I was finally old enough to be like, yeah, he's right. So I really did try to not touch that money when I first moved to Japan. I did have some other savings. And I will admit that my family is very generous and they did send me money without me asking. So I have had additional benefit from that. And I don't want to sound like I've been doing this all on my own because that's not the case. I've had my family, I've had my boyfriend helping me. He watched my cat for me while like he couldn't come right away, my kitty Zook. And so I've definitely had a lot of financial and like emotional help and things like that. So I don't want to make it sound like I did this all by myself either. But basically, I had this pension from Korea, which helped me pay for school my first couple semesters and live here without having to work right away. But then the second semester, I was like, oh no, I really need to get a part-time job. They're called arubaito or baito in Korea. They use the same word, arubaitu or baitu, which comes from German. I think it's hilarious that German is the word for part-time job in both those countries. But I digress once again. I also didn't take a shower, so we're not going to show my face. But basically, I've been sort of living off the dregs and drabs of that. And I did get a job, one commission job from Honest History magazine, which they have been very, very good to me. They've given me jobs on a few issues. It's a children's magazine based out of Los Angeles. They write really cool articles about history that is accessible for children. I would argue that some of the stuff is maybe a little hard concepts still for some kids, but it's definitely written at least in a way that's accessible. I'm not a big fan of these colors. It's coming out a little children's book, but I guess that's okay. I'm definitely talking, which is distracting me a little bit, even though I do talk on the phone and paint all the time. I kind of made this sketch a little bit quickly this morning. I'm digressing again. So my point is I've been running out of money, and I tried to get a part-time job, and it ended up being way more stressful than I expected. And the minimum wage in Japan is pretty darn low, and the yen is pretty weak. And basically it was like I did get a job offer. I did a couple of like interviews in Japanese, which was kind of stressful. And I got a job offer from a really cool place that I honestly really did want to work at. It was a traditional like tea place. If you're familiar with Osaka at all, it's near like Nagahorebashi station. And it's like a very cool, like touristy area. And they wanted, I think, an English speaker. They said primarily for like European tourists. And I spoke to them, and they were like really impressed that my Japanese was like not as shitty as they thought it might be, or that it was as good as it was. And I started like trying to get all of my papers together in order to work there. But one of the things that they needed was something that was, I believe in Japanese, it was called hoshonin, which is like, there really isn't a direct translation to English, but I would call it a cosigner or a guarantor. Basically, someone that would be like, if she steals or intentionally works poorly at this job, you're sort of responsible for her or for me. And I really didn't have anybody in Japan, or I still don't really have any in Japan, that I feel comfortable enough asking that. And I asked like the international center at my school about it, and they basically said, ask a friend. And it's like kind of depressing to be like, I have no friends. And I do have acquaintances in class and people that I do consider more friends now than I did a couple months ago when I was looking for this job. But even those friends, I didn't feel comfortable putting them in that position. They're also international students like me. I feel like it's easier to be friends with other international students. They're not from North America, but they are also international. And, I just didn't feel comfortable. I did have one of them, she was willing to do it, but I left a bad taste in my mouth. I really didn't want to put her in that place. And so I decided to just give it up on that job and to sort of just give it up on the part-time jobs in Japan and instead pivot towards what I already have some skills in, which was teaching English online. So if you happen to be, um, what do I say? If you happen to be somebody who is looking to learn English and you're watching this stream and you want to talk to English speaker, I'm on italki, so we can always have a conversation on there one-on-one. I teach English now on italki. It's a website that you can find English tutors or any language tutors. I've used it for myself for Korean and for Japanese. And I lowered my rates on there and updated my profile, and thankfully I've been getting students, so I've been getting some money on there. So I'm feeling a little more optimistic lately that maybe this is doable, but I still feel very much kind of like, okay, the financial part of my life is definitely kind of a failure. I'm 34. I am almost killed all of my pension savings from Korea, and I'm getting a little nervous here that things are not gonna, work out in my life. Because I watch, if you're familiar, he has so many views. Caleb Hammer, Financial Audit, and I'm kind of obsessed with that channel. And he like really reams people for like their bad financial choices, and he'll be talking to, 20-year-olds, 23-year-olds who he'll be like, you're behind in retirement. And I'm like, that person is 23. Like, when I was 23, I had like, what I think I had worked only at a restaurant and at a frozen yogurt place. Like, I definitely had no savings at that age. And I nothing. So the idea that like I should have a retirement now kind of terrifies me, but I am 34 now, and I don't have like I have what, $2,000 in my pension still from Korea, but I imagine that money is gonna go, and it's really scary because I've thought about if I need to throw in the towel in this going to Japanese school, which I really don't wanna do. It's been really fun to go to school in Japan, and it's been sort of like, frankly, a dream that I had from when I was in my 20s, and I just didn't really have the courage to do it. My Japanese was also not as good, but I probably could have found a way to go to language school and then transition into maybe a university. And I just didn't have the courage and the wherewithal when I was that young to look into something like that. And it's not until I lived in Korea for that long and I feel like I was made more friends and had good relationships with people that I started to build more confidence in myself. And I know they say, like, they, the mysterious they, that you should have intrinsic confidence. It should come from within. You don't need to have outside validation. But I do think we are a social species. And if you're alone all the time, you can feel bad. You don't feel great. And I feel like when I started to make more relationships with people who are kind and supportive, not even necessarily of the art career, but just me as a human being, besides my parents, it means a lot. It means a lot to people to have that. So I think it just took me a long time to get to a place where I had more confidence in myself and that I felt like I could actually do it and that it didn't matter that I was going to be much older than all of my classmates, that I was going to be able to go to school. Um, yeah, I agree. I think personally, I think outside validation is personally pretty important too. I get a little annoyed with all of the like, it has to come from within, and like that's important. I agree with that to an extent, but I do think we can't be totally delusional in our lives and say that like we're not a social species and that we don't need other people around us. And I do think though that means we have to be very careful, I guess, about what we internalize and what we don't at the same time because I'm not saying you should cut out people from your life either because I think there's a little bit too much of that as well. Like if someone doesn't agree with you 100%, they're gone, they're out, they're not like the positive force in your life. There's too much of that, I think, too. Um, but you definitely want to tune out certain things that don't work for you and tune into things that do work for you. And that is not an easy thing to do, I think. But I feel like I'm digressing again. And basically, what I'm doing now is when I laid in all of the colors for the sky and the green, I basically totally lost my outline for the mushrooms. Oops. So I'm overlaying them with white and ivory paint. And I agree, it's all about balance. I think the difficulty is which parts do we keep and which parts do we leave behind? I think that's always the hard part for me because people are like, trust your instincts, trust your gut. And I'm like, I take medication. I don't trust my gut for the life of me. I don't have a very happy head most of the time. So I don't feel like trusting my gut is always the best message for me personally because my gut is usually in a state of fear. Like I said, I teach on italki, but I teach on another platform too that I don't want to advertise, where I set my rates way too low because I was totally acting out of fear, and I'm really losing money and time on that platform. But I've developed like students who've already prepaid for classes, and I can't get off it yet. And so I definitely feel like for me, I can't always trust myself to do things that are in my best interest, unfortunately, because I'll react out of fear. And thankfully, italki has been taking off. And I just had a student today that I was talking to. And I think it's important to talk. Actually, italki is great because you can talk to people from all around the world. I really kind of wish my mom would maybe just become a tutor on there because you can just talk, you could just be a community tutor and just talk to people in your language and you can meet so many interesting people. I had a class today with a student who left Russia with his family before the war really got to the point where it is now. They left as political like asylum as refugees. And he just kept telling me how great the US is because the roads are clean and the roads are not made of dirt. And I feel like that's not something I necessarily think of when I think of Russia. He did say the buildings are also nice too, and I have seen those memes, of like Soviet Russia and the weird buildings there. But, I don't think he was from a poor part of town necessarily. He said, by the airport, everything is nice and the roads are great. But then you get outside the airport area and all of a sudden everything kind of, disintegrates into dirt roads. And that's something that I think really, really don't think about growing up in LA. We definitely have a lot of other issues. We have a huge homelessness problem in Los Angeles, where I am roughly from. I'm from a suburb there. But yeah, Italki is great for meeting some really interesting people. But I think I keep digressing from my point. Yeah, I totally agree. About selling things too low, no kidding. So, and that was the other failure, which you've reminded me of. So thank you for bringing me back to my point, to what I was talking about, and not talking about my student. Um, which is, I feel like another thing that made me feel like a failure was earlier this month, I had an art market as part of my school, which I was really looking forward to, and I put like a ton of effort into, I felt like, in October, building up to it. And it wasn't a failure in that I lost money. So let's just leave it at start with that. I did actually make some money off of it, but I still left feeling not great. And I think there was a couple reasons. I think one, my boyfriend from Korea came out and helped, and we had a really good time together, and then seeing him leave really made me question, like, what am I doing here? Why did I leave like this life in Korea where I was working at like a pretty good private school and I was making decent money and I was working part-time excuse me, as well, like teaching English to like a startup company. Oh shit, I'm gonna need to get water. Okay, be right back. You can look at this lady. I need to get water. All right. Sorry. Maybe I'm getting sick. Usually I only get scratchy throats when I'm getting sick. Oh, furry commissions. That is actually, well, you say that's worst case scenario, but I live in Japan now, and that's another thing I actually wanted to talk about in this video once I'm done talking about how depressed I was after my art market, but how like anime stuff, which, I went to art school in the US, you weren't allowed to draw like that. But here we're encouraged to draw like that because that's the market. Now, furry is definitely a subsection of that market, which could be questionable for sure. But I've been kind of surprised at like how anime style or manga style is so much more like seen in exhibitions here. Like I've seen them in galleries, like that style. And that's really thrown me a bit for a loop. But I want to continue talking about feeling like a failure. So basically after this art market, I felt like a failure, and talking about like the low pricing is I did price my art, I think, too low during that art market. And that's part of the reason I think I came out feeling a little bad about it. But it's just everybody else was students and they also priced their stuff so low. So then I felt like I had to start lowering the prices that I had originally planned to do. I had some people early on kind of like balk, kind of get a little shocked at the price. And they asked if I was a teacher there because, like, I was charging, I think they thought too much for some of my work. So I was like, well, I need to make money, so I guess I'll just lower it. And for the most part, I don't mind the stuff that I sold at lower prices, but there are a couple of cute little pieces that I made that I was really pretty pleased with, that I think I would have rather have kept and given away as gifts rather than made the like 1,000 yen, which is like, I don't know, $7 on it. It was really cute. My dad had already expressed that he had liked it. And so I kind of regret like selling that one in particular, and I'm thinking of repainting it and giving it to him because I sold it for so cheap, and I think I would have preferred to just given him the gift, and it would have given me more joy than, you know, the like lunch from the gyudon place would have probably got. Um, oh yeah, I definitely am curious about other art markets. I was reading the comments. I'm definitely curious about other art markets in Japan. I don't know her name offhand, but there's this one artist I follow who does a lot of art markets in Japan. She's Chinese, but she lives in Japan and she does like all cats and they're really nicely done. And um, she does tons of markets and I'm sure there are better ones, but she lives in Tokyo. But I definitely priced the stuff too low and I definitely felt like it made my stuff cheaper and that made me feel bad. But, I did have enough money to live most of the month. Well, not really. That's not true. I would say I came away with between like 150, 170-ish after you think about expenses that how much I paid for everything. Since I did get some things printed and made, it wasn't all selling originals. So I didn't get in the red, but I didn't make as much as I'd hoped. So I kind of, blocked in the mushrooms here. Um, making art for yourself is almost impossible. I think all of these like paintings that I did here, which were sort of like for myself, these were practice, was when I was working teaching English at an elementary school in Korea, and I wasn't doing the part-time um, evening job yet. I was only working from like 10:30 to like 4 o'clock. Or maybe it was 4:30, but I think it was only 4 o'clock. So I was really not working that many hours, but kids are a lot of work, okay? And I have to figure out how I'm going to do these mushrooms. But I think that was when I had time really to like just devote to making new art for myself. And that was in a unique period of my life that I'm glad that I spent that time doing that challenge because frankly, I haven't been able to make time to do that since then. I'm in school now, so I am still making art all the time, but it's not necessarily like what I would make because some of it's assignments. But we are getting into the end of our second semester, first year, and we're getting more assignments that are based off of like um, what we want to make, basically. But the truth is, they're like huge. They're big paintings. They're like really large. So right now, I'm painting on a B3 sized board, but like the size we're going to be painting on is like 3 times this or 2 times this, and I'm just not used to painting that large, frankly. And so I'm kind of a little not looking forward to that. I prefer painting smaller and producing a lot instead of um, painting really big because I just don't really feel like there's a reason to, except for when you're in school, I suppose. But the truth is, like, unless I'm going to become, an exhibition artist, I'm not going to be painting that large. I'm always going to be kind of painting probably around this size or a little bit bigger. But I really just paint whatever can fit inside my scanner so that way I can edit it in Photoshop and then put it in my portfolio and hopefully send off to companies. But yeah, so I felt like a failure because I couldn't get a part-time job. My market didn't go quite as well as I had hoped. And, my boyfriend left and I felt like, I could have just stayed in Korea and working at that elementary job and maybe quit the like afternoon job and just focused on art and my free time instead of going back to school like I chose to do. And maybe that would be better than going back to school in Japan. Financially, it definitely would have been better. But I always wanted to live in Japan. My language skills are better in Japanese than they are in Korean, which is very embarrassing to say. But I don't speak Korean very well, despite the fact that I lived there such a long time. It's a harder language than I anticipated. I thought if I had spoken, Japanese as well as I did, that I would get better at Korean quickly, and that was not the case at all. And I think when you're actually working instead of a student like I was when I studied Japanese, your priorities are a little bit different, and it just didn't work out, unfortunately. But sometimes I wonder if I should have just stayed there and stuck through. But I think I would have been really miserable, and that's the thing. I felt like I had to leave, so I don't regret, but I do view it as maybe a possibility of going back. Um, because I do still have friends there, and I just feel like I have more connections in Korea than I do, obviously, in Japan so far. And even in the US, I just never really built much of a community there, even though I lived in the same city my whole life, which is a little weird. Well, Sangjin respects my decision, but Sangjin is my boyfriend, so, he doesn't have a choice in the matter, I think. And I don't want to just be a Debbie Downer, and I've already been painting for almost an hour, and I'd like to start getting onto these mushrooms. So I'm gonna go to a reference photo for myself, so I may not see the chat for a little bit. Um, yeah. I feel like it's admirable, thank you, to pursue a dream, but I'm also kind of like, I don't want to be. So I'm very scared. I'll be honest. I'm really scared. My mother has autoimmune disease, or a couple diseases. She has like rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia and another associated autoimmune disease in her eyes. I forgot what it's called, but it's pretty common when you have these other autoimmune problems. So, a big fear of mine is that I might develop, maybe not necessarily what she has, but I just feel like in general, we really don't know what life will throw us. And I'm 34, I'm in good health. Praise be, if we're in the Handmaid's Tale, or thank God, or whatever, knock on wood. I'm in good health right now, and nothing has damaged my health. I really try my best to stay in good health. But my big fear is that one of these days something might just happen, and I won't be in good health, and I won't have the financial ability to take care of myself. And that's a really big fear of mine. And so I just feel a lot of stress these days that I've let so much time go where I've not allowed myself to create like more of a buffer for myself in case something were to happen. Because I don't want to be dependent on other people to take care of me if, you know, hopefully nothing happens, but if I got in an accident or if I do develop some sort of chronic disorder or disease, it is more common in women than it is in men generally to develop autoimmune disorders. And it's just a big fear of mine that that could happen, or I could get in a car accident. I know, like, you can always say this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. But the thing is, like, you should maybe prepare a little bit financially and not just always be like, you know, living in the moment because you could die tomorrow. You should also kind of consider, well, maybe I'll live another 5 years and get sick, and then what am I going to do? So I just really don't want to be in a situation where I have to be dependent on other people to take care of me because I do develop rheumatoid arthritis and I can't draw anymore or as much because I have pain in my hands. I knew someone in school who was very young. I think he was only like 19 or 20, and he had it. And it hindered his ability to do work for school. And that's just, it's scary to think of that happening. And so I just don't want to be in a position where I'm not at least got some things in the mix that I can depend on. I do have this English teaching ability now. For mostly it's just talking in English. I don't feel like I'm a super skilled English teacher by any means, but I have been doing it for a very long time. And I do feel like I could always fall back on that, even though it's definitely not what I would like to do. And frankly, I think it requires more energy, but it wouldn't require my hands in the same way that, painting does. So I am afraid someday that something will happen and I'm not going to be able to take care of myself. And that's scary. And I do try to pursue my dreams and do what I want to do, but I'm feeling such a sense of urgency these days to get things off the ground like immediately. And that sense of urgency, I think, is making me make kind of bad decisions. Like, undercharging on this English site, or, maybe I've bounced around on different like ideas for my business and trying to make money for my art. And so this recent idea of like doing live streams is sort of a new idea that I have to kind of promote some of my original art pieces, since in Japan, I've had an easier time. I've only had one experience so far, but I had a much easier time at the post office than I ever did in Korea. Korea, I always had a really hard time, obviously, because one, my Korean is not as good, and two, they were just way more intense about it. I couldn't believe how relaxed like the Japanese post office was. They were just kind of like, yeah, sure, here, and I just like wrote down an address, international address, with my hand, like by hand. Like they didn't print it out and stick it on there. They didn't do a tracking number. They didn't do anything, and it was the official post office. But it was ended up being very inexpensive, and it got there. So since I've moved to Japan, I feel like, okay, maybe I can actually sell some products like original artwork, some of the things from my art market that I have left over, and just see how that goes. And so, but that's just been a recent new idea. So sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe I need to just stick to one idea. Like I said, I've worked for Honest History, and that's more of an editorial kind of job. And maybe I should just focus on editorial work and try to be an editorial artist. Or I've gotten lucky recently and I got a licensing deal for some of my artwork. And I got a licensing deal in August, but I didn't really make any money off of it until recently. I got a paycheck for over $100. So for me, that's a big amount of money. I agree about oh wait, I have to read Jet Blackbird's comments, because she or he, whoever you are, or they, or whoever you are out there, thank you for leaving comments. I really appreciate it. So yeah, I do feel like I could get a job back in Korea, and that is something, like I already mentioned, that I would definitely do. I have a good relationship with the school that I left, and oh, hi, she, they. Thank you for pronouns and normalizing pronouns. So I think that is a possibility, but of course it'll feel like a bit of a failure, but that's life. And virtual products that people, oh, really? English learning worksheets. Maybe I'll have to look into that. But again, that's me getting distracted again. I was thinking like, oh, I could do an English like learning podcast, because I found a really good Japanese learning podcast, and I was like, I could kind of mimic that person's podcast because I really enjoy hers. Late I Oh man, what's her name? She has like little animations of like food, and they just speak very simple Japanese, and it's really cute. It's on YouTube, but it's also just an audio podcast as well. But I just bounce all over the place. And I agree that working a corporate job has no guarantee too. I totally agree with that. And that's why I am sort of all for going for what you want, because this idea that like, oh, you work for a company, so it's going to be safe, I think is, unfortunately just not true. Maybe it's never been true, but it's definitely not true these days. We've learned during COVID. And this painting is coming out weird. I'm trying to do like, these are going to be Amanita, the red mushrooms, and they sometimes have this kind of like little frilly thing underneath. But I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat, so I'm not looking at my computer. I put together some reference photos of mushrooms. But it's coming out a little weird, but it's okay. It's a little harder than I anticipated to talk at the same time. If I was just talking to my parents or to my boyfriend, I think I'd feel less nervous. Even though he's in the chat, I feel like I want to make sure that I sound like I'm making sense. But I agree about things having no guarantee. It's just, I just really am scared of being dependent on people, and I kind of am a little bit these days if things go bad, because I don't think I have enough money if things really got bad, unfortunately. But I do have, I mean, the beauty of, being a student here is I do have health care. I don't have to pay very much for it. I do have to figure out the bureaucracy of getting a new card, because apparently they send out a new card every October, which I was unaware of. And and I got a mail that I never, like, I wasn't home. And so I have to like pick it up. So I have to go to the like ward office this week and pick up my new card. But I only pay 2,500 yen a month for this healthcare, which is probably the equivalent of like $19. So that's good. At least I have like healthcare, and I haven't thankfully gotten seriously sick yet, which is a miracle. But winter is coming, as the Starks say. So I could still get sick and need to go one of these days. I think I'm going to move on to the red for the Amanita mushrooms, because I think that'll help make them look like what they're supposed to be. I hope that licensing will go well. I'm really optimistic. I feel really happy that like I made sales. It's on this website called Muse Wall Studio. I'll put it in the description later, or I can put it in the description now, but I don't think, I mean, I feel like wallpaper is such a luxury item. It's although it's pretty cheap. It's peel and stick, wallpaper from this company. But for me, like, the idea of wallpaper is, I live in a one-room apartment right now that I really like, but having me and the kitty together can be a little bit much. But yeah, if you're curious about seeing any of my designs, I'll put a link right now, because I'm pretty proud of them. To be honest, I'm glad that like designs that I made really for myself have gotten a home somewhere, and that makes me feel good. So if you're curious about my wallpaper, but the thing is that I think my wallpaper designs are probably more suited towards children's rooms, because they're a little bit bright, I think, for the average persons or most people. I don't mean average in a bad way. I think, including myself, they're a little bold for most homeowners, and definitely for a renter, right? So I can understand that they would not be popping off or selling very well, because they are maybe a little niche in their desirability. But I'm very proud of them still, and I think children's room would be more their home, probably. And I have thought about making, because I like this company and they probably would take more designs if I made them. So I've thought about making some other, like, more simple designs for them and seeing if they would be interested. But I've not made a ton of money since selling on there, so I don't know if that's the best use. That's the problem, right? If you have your own business or your own art thing, or even your own hobby, if you're just learning something new, like a language, it's so hard to know, like, what is the best place to put your time. I remember that when I was studying Japanese early on, I would just do all of this Googling of like, should I study vocabulary? Should I study, what's the best way to learn a language quickly? And I would spend more time researching on how to study. I remember at the time thinking I was being stupid too, like more time trying to find on how I can learn Japanese quickly than actually studying Japanese. And I think that can happen with a hobby or in a business, is like you start kind of doubting or double thinking and spending time in weird places, doing more research than like actually just doing. So as of right now, I personally don't think that investing time into making more patterns for this particular company is the best use of my time. But if I do make more patterns, maybe for myself, for just, personal portfolio growth, maybe I will consider making some in other colorways that are a little more muted, or, secondary patterns that are more geometric, and then maybe see if like Muse Wall Studio would be interested. But I think we can get so stuck on like trying to game a system, and then we don't actually like do anything in the system. We're just like trying to figure out how to game it all the time. So like this stream, for example, I almost gave up on because I didn't realize I couldn't record on my phone. And I was like, nobody's going to watch it anyway. So who cares? I can just reschedule it. But I feel like with my computer, oh, thank you, Jet Blackbird. Go to bed. It's late if you're in the States. I know I started this really late, which is another thing that I kind of was not planning to do. I was planning to start this earlier, but I woke up late and I again thought about just not doing it, but we're doing it anyway. And I've been doing it for an hour and I think it's going to take a while for me to finish. And I don't know if I can see. Oh, there's 3 people. Does that mean there's just like me, Sungjin, and one other, and Jet Blackbird? It's okay. So Sungjin might have left, but that's okay. We're gonna keep working on this painting. I think it's still gonna take a while, honestly. Maybe we won't get it totally finished today because I'm feeling a lot of pressure, frankly, from having the stream going on, and I'm disappointed that I couldn't use my phone to get a better angle, and it makes it hard for me to see my reference paintings or reference photos, I mean, that I saved for myself. Okay, Sungjin is still listening to me, thank you. But I'm going really bright with these Amanita mushrooms. We're going a little children's book color here today. I think that's okay. It's the first stream that I've ever done, and I'm pretty nervous about it. And I drew this drawing a little slapdash, but I really wanted to do mushrooms because I think they're really cute. And that was one of the things that I felt like from this market that sold well. People seem to be into, particularly Amanita, the little red mushrooms with the white dots. I think they're so cute. But if you look at the real mushrooms, and if you have trypophobia, they can kind of get a little creepy. So don't gaze upon the mushroom for too long. If you have trypophobia like me. But I feel like maybe the composition of this painting is not ideal. I think it's all scooted a little bit to the left, and maybe it should have been a little more centered, but I feel like I want to put something here to balance it. I don't know. And the frog has gotten totally lost. So you can't tell, but this is supposed to be a frog. We got a butterfly and a snail. So we have a little meeting of tiny critters on the mushrooms, or at least that's the plan. Do you think I should add clouds? And there's 2 of you? Wait, is it really just Sungjin and me now? That's funny. Okay. Well, I'll just talk to Sungjin then. So let's think. So I have the basic colors. For the mushrooms, and like I said, I feel like there needs to be something here. Like this is a little too scooted to one side, so maybe I'll add a mouse or some flowers here. We'll think about it. But I want to add more details to the mushrooms first. I'm going to add some shadows and some texture perhaps, and see how that goes. But yeah, so I don't think I want to talk about failure anymore. I think I'm burned myself out on that because frankly, if it's not going to change my behavior, I don't think there's really a big reason to dwell on it. You've got to kind of move past it. And as of right now, I'm not quite willing to give up on going to school here. It is something I've considered. I have thought about throwing in the towel because I think I'm going to run out of money before I can graduate. But I'm going to look into scholarships and see if I can get some financial help and for at least the school tuition. And maybe I can even get a scholarship that has a stipend. But I have a feeling that's probably more for like researchers than like I go to vocational school. I'm not in like even a university program or grad school program. So I'm wondering if like that kind of thing would be more limited to people who are in higher, fields of learning, not in a 2-year trade school for like art and design. But I don't know. There might be some special scholarships out there for international students, and they may not be as picky about the type of school that you're going to. So we'll see about that. Um, so I've done some chat GPTing on that front, and that's something I got to look into today. But I do have another English lesson tonight that I'm going to have to prepare a little bit for. But yeah, I think one thing that I do wish while living here that I could try to figure out how to do more of is getting out into Osaka and getting into Japan more. I feel like I'm finally living here, but there's certain things about my life that is like I don't really live in Japan except that I hear Japanese all the time, but I don't really have any opportunity to get out of my home, or I don't make opportunities to get out of my home rather. I, work online teaching English on the weekend, or I'm trying to work on my art business, or I'm sleeping or taking care of my cat, and I don't really get out very much. And that's something I'd like to change. And I'd like to try to figure out a way to integrate that maybe part of the time, not all the time, but into my YouTube channel because it's sort of a way to force me to get out because it's like, okay, it's part of my channel, so I have to do it. Um, and if that's the only way I can get myself out of the house in the beginning, I think it's okay. It's just I don't want to always feel like I have to film everything either, because you also want to just live your life and have things that belong only to you. And I watch Caroline Winkler. Winkler? God damn it. What's her name? She's mostly like a house, like interior girl lady, but she also has a podcast, Not for Everyone. And I really enjoy her personality. I think she's hilarious. But she talks about, making some things on YouTube and then making things that are just for you. Because, things on YouTube you're kind of sharing and they're for everybody. But when you make things that are like YouTube, when you're going out into the world and you're just experiencing it, you're not documenting it. It's just for you. But I feel like sometimes I just don't have the energy to do things just for me, and that's kind of depressing, but I'd really like to make YouTube as part of my way of getting out of the house and forcing myself to be a little bit more proactive about seeing more of Japan and seeing more of Osaka while I live here. So for example, there is like some lights in the city for Christmas right now, and I looked up to see what areas where maybe I can see some Christmas lights and things like that. And maybe I could try filming, seeing some beautiful Christmas displays in the city and then make an art piece inspired by it. So that's sort of my plan. But the art display, or not the art, excuse me, the light displays don't go up until I think December 14th. So I have to kind of wait a little bit until I can record. But I'm also a little worried that my iPhone will not be able to manage it. Um, I use my iPhone for all of my filming, and I'm not sure how it's going to be able to film in the dark. I think that might prove a little bit of a complication. But the plan is that I would go look at some lights in Osaka and then make an art piece inspired by it. And I think it would be really fun. And I think that's maybe what I'd like to integrate more into my channel and into my life is doing things just for fun and not always doing things because I feel like I got to do them. So I think that's the plan, but I have to wait until December 14th once everything is up. But I really would like to go out into nature more. If I could find the time to do that, I think I would feel a lot more peaceful in my daily life. I think I'm from Pasadena, California, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. And, LA, even though people probably just think of the city and being dirty, and those things are definitely accurate. Um, there's just a ton of wildlife. I mean, you can look up like near Griffith Park and places like that. There's like, mountain lions, and you can see hawks in the city. I remember being stuck on the 10, was it the 101 or the 110? I'm pretty sure it was the 110 heading into downtown, if you're familiar with LA. And I saw like a hawk like perched on an intersection at a light. Not an intersection, it was the highway, but whatever, you know what I mean. It was just perched in like the middle where there's like a divider, and there was it must have been a lamp. Um, and it was just chilling, and it was a hawk. Or I remember visiting my cousin when she lived with her husband in an apartment in downtown LA, and she said she had just seen a hawk on um the fire exit, like on the stairs down the fire exit. She had just seen a hawk, and like she took video of it. And so there's just, even though LA is definitely a city, it's so close to wildlife. There's the Sierra Nevada mountains right there, and you can go up to Mount Wilson, and there's so much hiking. And I just feel like everything is just so immediately accessible, that you can be in nature so easily. And I just, living in Seoul, that was just, didn't feel like that was the case. Although I think that's a little unfair. I think I didn't try, because Seoul does have a lot of little mountains throughout the city. So the last place that I lived in Seoul was called Gwanak-gu, and there is a mountain there called Gwanak-san. And I only went hiking up there one time, and it was like really close to our house. It was a pretty hard mountain though, but there are areas in Seoul, so I don't want to make it sound like, oh, Seoul and Osaka suck for nature, because there definitely is or are places where you can access nature in Seoul. I'm not as familiar with Osaka yet, but I don't feel like there's the same animal presence. And that's something that like I really miss, is just seeing animals all the time. Like growing up, we would go on walks at night, and like in the summer, you would see like little families of skunks, and they were cute as hell, but of course you're terrified that you're going to scare them. But they were so darn cute, like following their little mommy. And it's just so magical to see animals. And it makes me so sad that I just don't see animals like I used to. And it has been kind of nicer in Osaka than it was in Seoul on a daily basis, seeing some animals than I used to see. I've seen in the summer there were a lot of bats, which I did not anticipate. There was just bats flying around. I live near a stream, and I was like thought they were big moths at first, and then I realized they were bats. That was kind of cool. And then I've noticed there's this little critter. It's called an itachi, but it's basically like a little ferret or weasel. And it's in the city. And I've seen it a couple times now. So I get really excited whenever I see one of those guys in the city. So I am happy that I am seeing a little more animal presence in Osaka than I saw in Seoul. Or even Jeju Island. When I lived in Jeju Island, there was not that many animals, and that was pretty remote. And my theory is just Korea's cold, man, and I just think it's a kind of harsh environment to live, and it just doesn't give way to lots of wildlife. But that's just my personal theory. It is unverified and unresearched. So I'm not quite sure what else to talk about, frankly. Sangjin, do you have any suggestions if you're still listening to the chat? I was going to maybe put on. I can add. Oh, I know what I can talk about. So I just put out a new video recently that isn't performing particularly well, but that's okay. Where I visited a new art store in Osaka, or new for me, rather. It's called Kawachi, and my teachers call it Kawachi Gazai, though. Gazai just means like supplies, I guess, for art supplies specifically. And it's a chain, so there are some in other parts of the city. I think I had been to the Shinsaibashi one on vacation the previous year, because that one was just a standalone shop in a building. But this one that I went to in my recent video is attached to a mall, and it's in Umeda, which is closer to where I live, and it's also kind of like a more shopping central area. I mean, Shinsaibashi is also a shopping area, don't get me wrong, but this one's attached to a mall. So that's kind of nice if you're into malls. But for me, it was a day that was raining and I was really self conscious about filming. But it was still a cool shop. So if you're interested in seeing just an art supply tour, I did check it out. But I wouldn't say it was the most unusual or earth-breaking store in general. I think it was just a nicely stocked art shop. And I felt like the store that I went to in the summer called U Arts, even though it had a smaller supply of probably really real necessary supplies, um, it was definitely like a cuter shop if you just kind of wanted to look around. But if you're really looking for serious art supplies, I think Kawachi Gazai is definitely a good place to go. But there's also another place that I want to check out called Hands. It's how Hanzu or something, Hankyu Hands or Tokyu Hands, I think. And I'm messing up this grass. The grass is getting a little messed up, you guys. I think I'm getting a little caught in the weeds here because I want it to be darker in the front and get a little lighter in back because that's sort of how I was taught. Oh, it's just me and Sun. I think it's just me and Sungjin now. Should we listen to Warera wa Neko de Aru? I've been talking for an hour and 16 minutes and we're still not done. So we'll keep going for the 2 hours, I think. We'll go for 2 hours and hopefully I can finish this in 2 hours. So let's just get to it. Sungjin, if you're there, you can contribute in the chat and maybe help me come up with an idea. But I just wanted to talk about my art store video a little bit because I'm proud of it and I'm glad that I made it. But I do think there's tons of like Japanese art store videos out there. I just don't think there's as many from Osaka because people really just go to Tokyo and maybe Kyoto and stuff, but they don't necessarily go to Osaka, which is fine. Everybody can do what they want. But I think Osaka is an interesting place because it's a port town, and any place that's a port town is going to have kind of, I think, more interesting people, in my opinion, because it's going to be merchants. It's a merchant town. So it's going to create a much more like multicultural, I think, community. And I like that. And that's sort of why I decided to come to Osaka instead of another big city. And it's also near Kyoto, which is an old, capital. Focus on my art and listen to stuff. I think it is just you and me. Okay. So let's listen to I'm a Cat for a little bit. If you think that's a good idea. I'm not quite sure, but
Yeah.
okay, we'll listen to this for 10 minutes. If anybody has any questions though, I'll put it. Oh, you don't can't hear it? Okay, I feel like I should just talk. I don't know, I feel weird. Okay, whatever. I can just keep blathering on because I feel weird. I feel like no one's gonna, I mean, watch my little thing as a replay if I'm not talking, but it is getting a little hard for me to concentrate at the same time. Um, and I'm not even sure if you can really see this painting very well, but it's okay. Um, I think the mushrooms need a deeper shadow. I think that's something that I kind of tend to miss generally is that I don't get my shadows dark enough. So let's really try to get these shadows darker. Um, because I don't think it looks beautiful. I think it looks pretty rough right now, but it is what it is. I feel like this is my first time doing something on streaming, and I chose a bit of a difficult painting for me, frankly. I should have probably just done something in ink and planned the painting a little better than I did. But I really was a bit tight on time this morning because I had an online lesson. And yesterday I had a lot of online lessons for English, and I just couldn't quite bring myself to work in the evening after I finished an hour and a half long English lesson. So I was going to wake up early this morning and sort of prepare things, but I didn't prepare as much as I'd hoped. What I basically did prepare was adding my new paintings to my website, which I'm pleased with. I hope that people will check it out. But I'm going to continue adding paintings to my website as I go because I actually have quite a lot. It's just, I used to not want to sell them because I just felt like, well, first of all, who's going to buy them? You know, having kind of a negative self talk, but also, as I mentioned previously in this video, you know, I had trouble mailing things with the Korean system and it was very expensive. But the one thing that I've mailed so far was pretty simple, so I'm hoping that that's going to be the case here and I'm not going to have as much issues with the postal service. Also, I think FedEx also operates out of Japan, so if I have trouble with the Japanese postal service, I could probably use FedEx. It's just it was pretty cheap when I thought it was going to be more expensive, but I'm not sure like if the weight goes up a tiny bit or if I try to expedite something or if I want more of a tracking order whether it's going to go up a lot because that order was not tracked and that made me really nervous and I'm not sure if I want to do that again. So, we're working on the mushrooms. I think once the mushrooms are at least shaded, I can get the critters in. Um, but I'd like to also add some detail to the grass. I think maybe some flowers and ferns, maybe. But first, let's just get everything painted in. So I think I really am going to maybe have to look at a picture for the frog. Um, but first, maybe I can at least just get his color. I think the frog, we're going to make him more brown because we already have so much green in the grass. So if we can make the frog a little more brown, I think that would, he can be a greenish brown maybe. I think that might be better for me. I think, I don't know, we'll see. I just don't want him to be too close to the other colors in the piece, but at the same time, I don't want to go totally crazy. So let's see. It's a little green, I think, for me. I don't want it to be the same color as the mushroom, though, either. So maybe we'll stick with it. So today, I think I mentioned already that I basically got my new paintings up on my website, and then I taught an English class, and then I started this streaming, and it's going a little longer than I had anticipated. But after this, my plan is to basically work on some commission that I have. I think that's what I really should work on after this because I'd like to get it done by tomorrow, which is Monday. I have a commission for Honest History magazine, which I'm really pleased about. Again, I got to try to lean more into positive thinking and gratitude. I am a little disappointed they didn't ask for as many pieces as they have in the past, but I'm really happy that they asked me regardless. Or at least I'm going to say that, even though I don't 100% feel that way. I really wish they had asked for more work, and they didn't ask for me to help on their last issue, which really bummed me out because it was about ancient Egypt, and I would love to paint something related to Egypt or draw something related to Egypt, but that's okay. I can still do that on my own. And so this next issue, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it, but I don't think it matters. It's just the next issue is going to be about, it's going to be about the Korean Peninsula. So I won't say what I'm specifically illustrating on, but I was like, I lived in Korea. Please give me more work. But it didn't happen. But I'm excited. I'm going to get more work with Honest History. And I'm also have a licensing job that I still haven't finished all of my files for. I have to reformat the files to the size that they need. And for some of the pieces, that means like really significantly changing it. And so I've gotten most of the stuff done, but I haven't gotten everything done. So that's another thing I got to do today is Honest History and this licensing company. But I also have another online class for an hour and a half tonight. And it's the weekend, and really all I want to do is nap. So I'm curious. I think it's just, it's probably not a lot of people currently watching the stream with us right now. But if you are rewatching the stream and you've made it this far, I'm curious what your main procrastination technique is, or what you do when you procrastinate. I think for me, my main procrastination tool of choice is just sleeping. I just take lots of naps. And I think I justify that because I am usually tired, but also it's like, well, I need to take care of my health. I'm like, I need to take care of this. So I deserve this nap. I need this nap. And so it's very easy for me to just persuade myself that it's necessary and I deserve it. I think other people probably have other things that are slightly more productive, like cleaning maybe is a way that they procrastinate, or, streaming stuff. Watching things on Netflix, I'm sure, is a common way, and that's a way I used to procrastinate, but I don't anymore. I don't know. I do scroll around on YouTube a lot, but I don't view it as procrastination because it just happens. Like a nap is like a plan, but I just waste time on YouTube without even realizing it. It's not an intentional procrastination technique. And well, I don't know if there's any such thing as an intentional procrastination technique. But yeah, so if you're watching this, I'd be curious what you do when you procrastinate. How do you justify it? I mean, like I said, for me, the justification is definitely that I'm tired. And it is usually true. I usually am tired, but taking a nap, sometimes just messes me up for the next day and the next day and the next day. So I don't know. But I really like sleep. So I don't know if that's going to be changing anytime soon. And it's hard, I think, when you have a cat and they're sleeping all the time and you look over and you just kind of want to join them in their slumber and when they look so cozy. So I am working on the snail, and the snail and the mushroom or the snail and the frog are rather close in color, which was not something I had considered when I drew this. So this is definitely a different, much more loose style than I would typically paint. I definitely prefer getting things a little bit more perfect than this. So maybe this is a good exercise for me, that it's as imperfect as it is. Like I said, I think this area feels a little empty to me, so I'm gonna try to add some maybe little flowers maybe that can stand out in this area. And maybe we'll add some like a little more like fern-like plants somewhere. So something that has been a weird pull for me lately is I've been watching clips on YouTube, and the two shows that keep getting ending up on my feed all of a sudden is Handmaid's Tale, which I stopped watching many moons ago because it was too depressing for me. Like I was still in the States, so it's definitely over 6 years ago where I was watching that show, and I just couldn't handle it. It was just freaking me out too much, and it wasn't good for my brain. Um, but I've been watching clips from it where things like the winning scenes, I guess, like where things have gotten better, or they've won, like the court scene and things like that have gotten recommended for me. So the kind of like vengeance scenes I've been watching for Handmaid's Tale, if you're not familiar with that show, it's kind of depressing. It was on Hulu. I don't know if it switched streaming devices, but it was on Hulu when I was in the US. And then the other thing that I keep getting little clips for on my YouTube algorithm is Game of Thrones, which I think is kind of hilarious because that was so big when I was in the US, but I refused to watch it because I got too annoyed that they were diverging so much from the original books, even though George R. R. Martin was working on it. But I've been watching clips from after the books, since the books he never freaking finished. So I've been watching some clips where things finally like progressed past to where I would like to kind of know what happened. But I remember not wanting to really watch it after they ended because I knew the end of the story and I was like really upset about it. But I guess enough time has passed that maybe I can get over it. But I still don't think I'm going to watch Game of Thrones. I'm too pissed that George R. R. Martin has basically seems to have thrown in the towel on ever completing those books. And I really enjoyed them. And I really feel like he just basically has foregone any conclusion on ever finishing those. I just don't think he ever will now that it was made a series and there's House of Dragon now. And I'm sure he's helping create that show in some way, or at least making tons of money off of it. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be too annoyed because if I made all that money, I don't know if I would still stay dedicated. Yeah, watching dumb YouTube. That's pretty much what I've been doing, which is watching like clips of Game of Thrones and clips of Handmaid's Tale. The Game of Thrones clips that I'm watching are basically just Daenerys being cool and having her dragons, but I know things don't end well, so I just am too depressed to watch the show. I really would like to start reading again. So if anybody has any like fantasy book recommendations that are maybe completed stories, because I feel like what keeps happening is I've gotten into a fantasy book like Game of Thrones or Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and his other book, I forgot what the second book was called. But he's never finished those either, and it's been such a long time, and I think he's also sort of maybe given up on Quoth or Coat, and I'm really disappointed because those books I thought I loved Game of Thrones, but there was something about those books that were visually, like, really created really strong visual images in my head, and I kind of have thought of rereading, or I even listened to the audiobook, was pretty good. I recommend Name of the Wind, and the other book. I think the next one's supposed to be like Doors of Wisdom, but I forgot what the middle book. Oh no, I forgot what the middle book was called. But oh, it's just so I feel like, oops, I almost knocked over my water. So if anybody has a fantasy book recommendation that is a completed series, that would be very nice. I read, I don't remember the name of the author now, but I did read a really long fantasy book, novella, whatever, when I first moved to Seoul. It was uh oh man. It was the Something Assassin, and the author is a woman, and there was a bunch of books, and it clearly, like, were not super planned out. Like, I felt like she was kinda making it up as she went along, and there were, like, 13 or 17, some odd number of books, and they didn't all follow our main character, Fitz chivalry, um, but those were not super great, but I read them all because I think I was totally escaping reality. That used to be my old procrastination method, was total and complete escapism. I would binge a show or binge a book and just completely, um, leave reality and just totally immerse myself in something else, and I definitely still have that predilection. I don't really like necessarily being in reality. And I think instead, art has become more of the escape, and maybe building this business has become kind of the obsession. Instead of going into fantasy lands, I could just go into my own head. I don't know if that's really better, to be honest, because going into your own head is also not part of living in the world sometimes. And I do worry sometimes that I'm going to end up a bit of a lonely person because I don't necessarily interact enough with the world around me. So that is something I think about sometimes, especially when people in my life ask me, like, why don't you have friends? Or, ask me what's going to happen when you're sick and there's no one there to take care of you. Those kind of helpful family reminders don't necessarily make you feel great about your life choices and make me a little worried that I live too much inside my own imagination and my own brain and not enough in the real world. But I just feel like the real world is not really a place that I want to be a part of most of the time. But I don't really have a choice in the matter. You can tune out, but it's still going to affect you. I mean, I tuned out so much when I lived in Korea and during COVID, but I could have, pursued learning Korean and improving my language skills. And that would have, if I had obsessed over that instead of whatever I was obsessing over at that time, which I really don't even remember. I was probably reading that book. If I had obsessed over learning Korean instead, maybe I could have gotten a permanent residency visa and I could have gotten a job that was not, teaching English, and maybe I wouldn't have moved to Japan. Who knows? So I want to make sure that when I am spending a lot of time on something, it's not like everything has to always be um not everything has to be productive. I don't like that, but I do feel like watching TV is not something you're gonna look back on and feel like you accomplished something or you feel good about it. I do feel like painting, though, is something that I can look back on and feel, like, good about it. I don't feel like I've wasted time doing that, and even if no one really re-watches this stream, it's been a stream of consciousness of me talking, and, I will have some kind of little painting out of it. I'm trying to add a little more detail to the grass, like I mentioned. So I have some little flowers and a few little leaves. This is definitely coming out, like I said, a little bit more cartoony or children's booky than what I usually like to go for with my style, but this is sort of my default way of painting, I think. If I'm being honest with myself, I do go a little bit more graphic and a little more simplified and maybe a little bit childish, or childlike when I paint and I'm left to my own devices. Um, but that's okay. It's just I would like to make more sophisticated art and as well. I don't want to be just making kind of more children's art. Um, so I think it's time to really try to finish the critters, and then I'm gonna put dots on the mushrooms last, but I'm just not sure. I feel like the mushrooms might need a little more shading. Man, I really want to finish this in 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to look at my reference. So if anybody leaves comments, it's going to take a little bit for me to see because I'm going to look at my reference photos for the Amanita mushroom and my frog. Because I do have a reference photo for the frog because unfortunately I am not so well versed in the anatomy of a frog that I can draw from my mind. I do need to look at an image, but it still may come out a little questionable. We'll see. We'll do our best to make it somewhat cute. Burp. So I was hoping that this painting would be good enough that I would add it to my site afterwards, but I'm not sure whether it's going to quite meet my standards. We'll see. If it doesn't, maybe I'll add, after the stream is over, I can always add a little more detail or, ooh, it's too yellow. I can maybe add some, refine it a little bit. But I really was hoping that I could add this to my shop as another painting because that's sort of what I want to do on these live streams. I'd like to try to do a live stream every other week and make a painting and add it to my website. And that's sort of my plan. But obviously, you know, not all plans go the way we anticipate for them to go. And I think if this doesn't come out the way I like, I will not add it to my website. And that's okay. Because that's life in the big city, baby. Also, I'm getting a little hungry, so we're gonna have to consider what to eat soon. I don't really want to go out. Oh, I think I should have bought ramen yesterday. I thought about it. I didn't do it. Ramen's really not good for you. You should not be eating a large quantity of ramen, but it is pretty inexpensive. So if you do ever visit Japan, I think something that probably most people know about if they're interested in Japan is that they have pretty nice convenience stores. So I do have my preferred convenience stores for particular items. And apparently that's not unusual. I saw some like reel or whatever, like each convenience store has their best whatever. And for me, I didn't necessarily agree with their answers, but if I want like a smoothie, what I think is so cool is 7-Eleven here has like little cups of fruit, and then they have a little like blending machine, and you can buy the cup of fruit for like $2 to $3 ish, even less really when you could do the conversion. And you buy it, and then you use the little blending machine, and then you got yourself a little fresh smoothie from 7-Eleven. I mean, in the summer, I used it all the time. I went there to get me a smoothie. And then, according to some video I watched, they said 7-Eleven is the best place also for coffee. But I don't really think they have amazing coffee. I don't think any convenience store probably has the best coffee in the world. But I've noticed that Family Mart, or at least the one near my school, has like flavored sugars, like flavored hazelnut or cinnamon sugars, which, you know, not everybody is into flavored stuff for their coffee. But when I'm having convenience store coffee, I kind of don't mind adding a little bit of flavored sugar. So I personally prefer at least that Family Mart. Also, Lawson, for some reason, seems to have a lot of good sweets. I think they have better sweets, like more like baked goods than 7-Eleven or Family Mart. I don't know why, but I've gotten sort of prejudiced against Family Mart. I just feel like I think I had a hard time paying bills there once, and I got annoyed with them. But so that's another weird thing in Japan is that I pay most of my bills at the convenience store. So my bills have like a barcode on it, and I go to the convenience store and they ring me up. That's been very unusual to me. I did not expect that. I thought I could pay online, but since I didn't have like a Japanese card, it proved difficult. I could have applied to one, but it was confusing. So I mostly just pay at the convenience store. So that's convenient for sure. So yeah, sweets, I like going to Lawson's, and also Lawson has some Muji products. If you're familiar with Muji, it's a Japanese shop that has clothes, furniture, and like paper goods. So they usually have like cute notebooks from Muji or tape or scissors or things like that that are Muji brand at Lawson. So I'm a fan of that. And what else? There's some other smaller convenience stores, but those are really the three main ones that I go to personally. There's another one called like Daily something that I've seen in a few places, but it just doesn't seem to be as common. I don't really see Mini Stop in Osaka. Maybe it's more prevalent in Tokyo. I'm not sure. I feel like I used to see it more when I visited Japan a long time ago, but I don't know. I don't know if people care about convenience stores, but I feel like a lot of people who are interested in Japan do care about the convenience stores because they are so different than what we have in the US. But I would say it's the same in Korea. The convenience stores are different, and they're definitely places where like I would go to get food, which is I'm definitely not stopping by, a 7-Eleven or an AM PM in the US to like get, personally I'm not going there to get like, food. I know some people do get, nachos and stuff from those places, but that kind of terrifies me. I can't imagine that it's very good. Um I did used to get though Slurpees as a kid from 7-Eleven. That was pretty fun. I did enjoy that. Um yeah. That's what they were called, right? They were Slurpees. Okay, this frog's not terrible, but he definitely needs a shadow. Frog needs a shadow because he is sitting on the mushroom. So let's give him a bit of a shadow. So something that like I do sometimes forget is giving them dark enough shadows, but I feel like shadows are really important not just because like that's how reality works, but because it really helps ground whatever you're painting. So if you don't put a shadow under something or a dark enough shadow, it's going to really look like it's just floating in space. It's not going to look like it's really on this mushroom. It's just going to look like really phony, I guess is the best way to put it. I mean, not that it looks super realistic now, but it's just not definitely not going to look placed. It's going to look like it's just floating above it. And I feel like I used to not put dark enough shadows, and so I'm trying. I might have gone a little bit too big of a spread on this shadow, but I think it's dark enough. Um, that's why I'm trying to do everything first and then doing the dots on the mushrooms last, because I know that putting the critters on the mushrooms is going to affect the color, and I know I'm going to have to put a shadow, so that's why I'm doing everything last before adding the final details on the mushrooms. And I'm really hoping once I do add the dots that it's going to bring some real depth to the piece. And that's my hope. That tends to be my experience, is that there's usually a pretty long ugly period of, I think, any painting when you're doing it, where you're like, this is never going to work out and I should just scrap it. And I've learned to just know that that's just the case. I do sometimes lose faith, and I may have with this painting if it wasn't a live stream, but I think there is some issues. Like, I don't really like that the sky and the color of this is so close together. So I may try to create some darker shadows maybe on this mushroom so that there's a little bit more of a differentiation here. So you can really see, even though the other mushrooms may not have as dark of a line, they are surrounded by dark. And so I think I can get away with it. I think it'll be okay. You can tell me if you disagree, but and that way I can get a little bit more detail in with this finer brush. And now we should probably move on to the snail, but I'm not quite done with the frog. I'm not quite ready. He needs like some white and some darker darks, I think. But this stream is turning really long. That's not my intention. Sorry. Maybe I can edit it down, but part of the reason I decided I wanted to do streams was because I don't really have time to edit a video every week. And so I thought if I did a stream every other week and a video every other week, that's sort of been my new solution in my head to being able to produce more videos. But I think if a stream is this long, most people are going to check out or just not watch it, which is totally understandable. But this is the first one, so I guess I'm learning, and that's all you can do. So I'm still looking at the reference. So if there is anybody in the chat, I apologize, but I don't, or if my picture has gotten off, I can't see it right now. I'm sorry, but I'm trying to get this frog done before I go back to seeing what's happening over there. But I think last time I checked, it was just 2 people, one of which was Sangjin, and yeah, so this frog, he's not too bad. I mean, he's a little cartoony, but it's okay. I think considering that this is the first time, I say considering a lot. I think that's a weird thing that you notice when you start recording yourself and editing videos of yourself, is you realize you say certain phrases a lot, and I definitely say considering a fair amount of times. I also, in my videos, tend to end saying that I'm hungry and what I'm going to go eat. And I was already doing that in this video, which is I am getting a little hungry and I'm thinking of what I'm going to eat. I do have a meal kit service that I bought. It's not, well, meal kit's generous. It's really frozen food. It's not like HelloFresh or something like that. But it's frozen food that I've gotten, that I heat up, that I can eat in large amounts, or not large amounts, that I can have for like a week. That's real food, because I just don't cook. And cooking for myself just feels like I just don't have time for that to be worth it. And maybe that's depressing to some people, I don't know, but I just don't feel like I have time to devote to cooking, and it's just not something that I want to do. So I looked into a microwave meal service, and there was one named Nosh, which I thought was hilarious. Nosh is like a Yiddish word that means to like snack, basically, or have a little snack. So I definitely wanted to go with that one because I thought it was just really funny. And so in Japanese, it's like nashu, or nashu. It's weird, but it's not cheap. That's the thing, is it's like, it's not like I'm really saving money doing it. I mean, I'd probably spend less if I went to like a gyudon, like beef, meat bowl place every day, would probably be cheaper, honestly. But like, I really don't want to just be eating beef meatballs every day. At least this meal's like kit or whatever, or microwave meal, whatever, is has vegetables, and it's, calorie controlled, I suppose. It's not unhealthy meal stuff. It's not like, Hot Pocket. So it's not Hot Pocket. And so I feel like it's not terrible. But like I said, the delivery fee is pretty high. So I'll be like, oh, it's not that expensive. And then I get to checkout, and all of a sudden the delivery fee is really high. So this is really boring to listen to, Shirley. Let's think of something else. So if anybody has been to Japan for travel or work or whatever, I would really love to hear from people what they enjoyed or didn't enjoy about Japan in general, and if you have any recommendations. So I live in Osaka, so I am in the Kansai area, and I really would like to go to Wakayama, which is like supposed to have a lot more nature. I've only been to Kobe and Nara, and I went to Kyoto a long time ago when I visited Japan when I was only 20, and I'm 34 now. So it's been a really long time since I went there once briefly. I did before COVID. I went and I saw my friend and her husband who had their honeymoon in Japan. I guess sort of like their honeymoon. Her sister was living, my friend's sister was living in Japan with her family at that time. And they were living in a bit of the countryside, frankly. I don't remember the name now of where they lived. But it was pretty far south of Tokyo. It was not close. But it wasn't Kansai. It wasn't that far either. But they had a car, and there was one day I remember we did, I think, go to Kyoto one day. But I don't remember doing much except that it was hot, and I think there was a lot of tourists, and I bought some like yuzu honey that I liked. That's all I remember from that day. But yeah, that's all I remember. So yeah, I have been there, I guess, twice. But I don't remember much though of the second time. But I just feel like Kyoto would be really nice, but I know that it would probably be really touristy, so I'm not super keen on doing that. My boyfriend and I visited Kobe, and we really enjoyed it, which I think surprised both of us. We also went to Nara for vacation, and I don't think we were particularly impressed. We just saw the deer, and I took a nap on a public bench, and I don't think we were super impressed with it though. But now I'm curious because my dad sent me a YouTube link that I still haven't watched, but that I guess before Kyoto was the capital of Japan. So Kyoto was the capital, and then it moved to Edo, which then later became Tokyo. I guess Nara was really, really like ancient capital, according to this video my dad sent me that I still haven't watched and I've only read the blurb of. But they're sort of like unearthing it right now and sort of recreating some of it. And so I would be curious to know more about that because I am curious about the history of Japan and things like that. But like I mentioned earlier in this chat, what I really miss are animals and nature. And so I would really like to see some nature and some animals. And so that's why I'm really curious about Wakayama. But it's winter now, and I just don't know if it's a good time to go there. And I think, what is it? Himeji Castle is nearby too. I don't know. I just feel like I'm living in Japan, and it was such a dream of mine, but that I'm not getting out to any of these places. And frankly, Osaka is a big city, and it's not really what I wanted in a weird way. Like, I did kind of want to get out of the city, but it's actually a pretty big city, and it doesn't feel as claustrophobic as Seoul does. Seoul is just so compact and you're so on top of everybody. Although Gwanak-gu, where we lived, was not super that way. But when I worked in Gangnam, I worked at like the worst job of my life at an English kindergarten. And I would have to take, line 2 in the morning, and it was just murder. But I haven't had any experience like that yet in Osaka where even during rush hour, I haven't had an experience where the subway or train was that awful. But it's still a city, and it's still not always very pleasant to be in the big city, in my opinion. I guess I'm getting maybe old or just weary of it. But at the same time, like, I would like to take part in some things in the big city, like going to museums and things like that and galleries. I haven't really taken advantage of some of that either. So that's something I'd like to include in some videos at some point. Um, I think the frog and the snail I definitely kind of just made up. I don't have a reference for the butterfly, so I'll go back to my chat and see how much longer. Oop. Sangjin says he loves my streaming, but I think he's the only one left. At least you're giving me view time, Sangjin. Thanks. It's been 2 hours. Damn. Oh man, I can't believe I've been talking that long. So let's try to finish up this butterfly and get in those. It's getting dark in here. Finish up this butterfly and then get in those white dots on the Amanita mushrooms, and then I think we can call it a day. I'm gonna just make up this butterfly. I should probably find a reference photo, but we're just gonna go for it. I wanted to do yellow to balance out the colors. I thought about a monarch, but I feel like the monarch would be too close in color to the mushroom. So let's get this butterfly in here. So I guess this stream has been really beneficial for me because I get to just blather on. And something I've noticed is I seem to be somebody who processes their emotions by talking. And it doesn't really matter if anybody's listening. So something I had a therapist recommend was actually for me to do, ooh, this butterfly turned out really fat. But she recommended that I do voice notes because, oh, here, let's look at the painting so far. Can you see? So here's the painting so far. I think this frog looks really cute, actually. The butterfly looks pretty rough. Snail also looks pretty rough, but it's okay. I think the butterfly's body got too fat, so we need to put him on a diet. But yeah, my therapist basically said that I should just talk into a voice memo, and it's something that I have done a few times, but I've never done on a consistent basis. But maybe that'll be my live streams. It'll be my live therapy session with me and Sungjin and whoever else wants to tune in and listen to me blather on. But if anybody rewatches this, I'd really, really appreciate any feedback about like questions you'd like to answered about Japan, or questions you'd like answered about art, or anything. Like I asked this to my English students, my students that are studying English as well. Like I can talk forever if you want me to talk, and I can make up things for us to talk about in our English lesson. But obviously, if you can bring me something that you're curious about, I would love to talk about that because it makes my life easier, but also I'd like to provide the most practical or useful knowledge for people in English classes. And they, I might start talking about something that they're really not that interested in, and they don't stop me. And it's better for them and for me if they basically say, let's talk about business models. I had a student recently we read something about different businesses, and not something I would necessarily be interested in talking about, but we had a great conversation still. It was very lovely. So I can talk about whatever I want, but it is usually helpful if you want to have a conversation to get an idea of what the other side wants. This butterfly doesn't look like a butterfly, you guys. Oh well, it's an interesting butterfly. Maybe it's I don't know, moth butterfly. Ooh, that's an interesting color. We'll do our best. And it's been 2 hours, and I gotta work on something else. And I'm sure the majority of my audience is in North America or the US, so everybody is asleep over there by now, which is good. You shouldn't stay up too late doing procrastination stuff. But let's hurry and get this little guy done. Sorry, Sungjin, that it doesn't look like a good butterfly. So Sungjin is my boyfriend. He studies insects and primarily flies. So I think messing up on the butterfly shouldn't be too insulting. But I've drawn a fair amount of butterflies that I can kind of, I think, get away with just making this one up. But I would say the wings are a little weird. But it's okay. I get a little too obsessed on getting things accurate sometimes, and I think that sometimes detracts from like the artistic quality of things, and you want to not necessarily, I mean, unless you're doing like anatomical things for somebody. It doesn't really matter if the butterfly looks totally right. Although I do think it needs more shadow so it looks grounded on the mushroom better. But we gotta let it dry for a bit before I do the shadow. So in the meantime, I think we can finally add some white to the Amanita mushrooms, finally. And then we can be done. So this is the final part. So the dots are not uniform. If you look at these mushrooms, they're kind of pretty raised. That's why it kind of makes me kind of a little grossed out sometimes. But they're usually pretty raised dots, and then near the bottom, they might get a little smaller and more dense on some of them, I've noticed. I don't know if there's different species of Amanita or if they're all the same, but I have seen some that look significantly different than the other ones. Like some seem to be really round and really chubby. Other ones I've seen look really flat and really wide. So I don't know if that's just small variations within the species or something. So I went with more just general kind of in between those two extremes. I already think this looks more finished. Just adding that white, I think, has added a lot of depth to the mushroom that did not previously exist. Tell me if anybody rewatches this stream, if you agree or disagree. So this was a good practice, I think, for me, because like I mentioned at the very, 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 very beginning, I think I have a painting coming up where I'm going to have to, well, I chose the subject. So I chose doing a scenery. And like I said, I'm kind of nervous about it because I don't really do landscapes very often. I tend to only do objects. I do central like images, more like this one. And whereas this is going to be much bigger, like big, landscape going back into space. And I'm a little nervous. So I kind of would like to make some testers. And I think this was a sort of a small toe in the water, but maybe for my next stream, I'll make a much smaller painting, first of all. I think this was way too big for a first time stream. It's taken way longer than I had hoped it would. And I think I'll make maybe a very simple landscape in the next video because I really would like to practice doing that for my final painting for school. Also, I'm curious if anybody watches this far or jumps this far to the end of the stream. I have a final project to do for school where we're going to have it exhibited as like part of our school exhibition for the first year student finished work and like second year student finished work. So I can choose whatever subject I want, and I'm trying to think about what I want to paint. I've chosen to paint instead of go digital. We have a choice, and I personally feel like painting is a skill that I'm not going to always have the luxury to spend time learning, and digital is something that I feel like I can learn more easily on my own. Now, also, I feel like digital is going to perhaps get overtaken by AI. Whereas I hope that's not true. I hope that I'm wrong. But I think, something that AI can't currently do yet is handmade work. And I say yet because, I don't know, they could create a robot that paints. You never know. But as of now, that doesn't exist. And so I would like to make a painting, long story short, as opposed to do digital. So I'm trying to think about a subject matter that I want to do. And I have a couple of ideas. So one is I really like tea sets. I'm kind of into tea sets. It's something that I visit on and off sometimes as a subject matter. And I found, or I got recommended rather, on Pinterest at some point, these little like tea set that has a cat head. They're like these vintage looking tea sets with a cat head, and they're so kind of creepy, but also cute. And so I thought of doing a painting of a tea set with this tea pot of a cat head with the lid is the cat head. And I would have like a teacup, and maybe I'd have one of those like little layered cake stands with a bunch of like little cookies and cakes on it. And I would want to paint it in a way that everything is really saturated. I'm thinking kind of like vintage, saturated, like 70s kind of colors and very pink and orange. I sort of made a sketch like that in my in a sketchbook a long time ago, but so I've thought about that as being one of my ideas for this final piece for school. But also, I feel like, well, it's basically a still life, which is not necessarily the most engaging thing for people. And something that I kind of want to start working on more is improving my figures. I still don't feel super confident in how I draw people. And right now I'm in a class where we've been doing some character design work. And so I also thought maybe I should do something where I would have to draw a person. So I don't really know what that means yet. I like, whereas the T set idea, I kind of have a clear idea so far of what that would look like, but I don't really know what I'm getting at when I think of a person. For some reason, I have this idea in my head of drawing a figure that's pretty, like, has an interesting pose. Like, I've been looking at different poses, mostly of like more manga style. And a lot of their poses are very like floating. They're not really like grounded for some reason. If you just look up pose in Pinterest and katakana, you can ask ChatGPT to do that, what katakana pose looks like. And you can see that like it's a lot of just like girls kind of floating in space, and their legs are kicking up or whatever. And so those are kind of cool. I thought, but I don't want to do like an anime style girl. That's just not my. I feel like there's a part of me that wants to do it because I'm seeing everybody else doing it, but I know that's not really my jam. But I really kind of want to do a figure with a head that's a flower. I don't know, it's kind of gotten into my mind. I have this idea of doing figures with flower heads. And it's not super original. I've done like naked figures with like star heads before. So I'm thinking of doing something like that with I really like pansy flowers, so I'm thinking of doing that with pansies. But I don't have a very clear notion of what that would look like yet. Um, so my throat kind of hurts from just talking to myself for this long. Um, I think this painting is done enough. Frankly, I don't think I can do any more on it right now where it'll make any significant change. I definitely kind of want to add clouds, but I'm not going to do that right now because I'm pretty pooped. But I think it looks pretty cute. I think the butterfly could use the most help. I think the frog looks the best. I did use a reference for the frog, so whereas the other two I kind of just made up. So I think we're done enough. I think this is done enough. So let's look. Uh-oh, you see my messy house? Shit. So this is the painting. Ta-da! So let's see if you can see the frog. Okay, I think the frog looks pretty cute. He looks pretty good. Butterfly could use a little help. Snail. And like I said, the composition, this area just feels like it's missing something. I mean, I could maybe just cut it and make it a little smaller, or I am considering adding something in this area. Tell me what you think. Should I add something like a little mouse? I don't know. I feel like 3 critters is like the perfect amount of critters. So I could add maybe a larger flower, like kind of like in the forefront, like you're kind of like it's closer in view. So maybe I could do that. And maybe add clouds, like fluffy white clouds, I think is a possibility. But tell me what you think, if I should add clouds or what I should add to this corner, because it just feels a little uneven. So Thank you so much for watching. There's my laundry. I didn't think it would be in the picture, but it is. And just a reminder, I do have some new paintings available on my webby sitey. And yeah, tell me what you think of the painting. I think it didn't come out too bad considering I just blathered on while painting for 2 hours. So, all right. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.